Hello everyone. Today I'll be talking about Spring Boot and GraphQL. What's GraphQL? GraphQL is a query programming language for your API, and this is initially developed by Facebook engineers, and this is very commonly used on the software industry these days. And Spring Boot came up with a very nice way of integrating GraphQL into the Spring Boot project, and on this video I will be talking more detail about how to configure a Spring Boot project with the GraphQL, and we will be doing a very small example on this demo.
Okay, as I said that this will be talking about Spring Boot with the GraphQL and a live coding demo on this video. Let's begin with the Spring Boot. For that, we have to create a Spring Boot project, and I will be using a Spring Boot initializer. If people are not familiar with the Spring Boot initializer, I would recommend that start using the Spring Boot initializer. This is one of the nice way of creating a initial bootstrap code in Spring Boot. Let's go to the Google and then go to the start.spring.io. That's a Spring Boot initializer. For this version, I'll be using a Java language and then Maven, and let's use the Spring Boot version. Currently, it's 3.0.2. We have to put some project metadata, and which is com.commerce blog GraphQL, and also we have to specify the artifact ID. Let's put it in a Spring Boot GraphQL SC. SC is like a service. And if you want, you can edit the description. For description, I'm just adding that with the Spring Boot with the GraphQL. Also, package name I'm going to change slightly a little bit up here. I'm keeping the default package name is com.commerce.blog.graphql. For this one, I'll be using a Java 17. Then we need to add a bunch of default dependencies on it. One is actuator. And we need to add the Spring for GraphQL. Also, I would recommend that we should add the Spring Web. That will give you an opportunity to just create any controllers on it. So once you have all the dependencies added, you can click on Generate button. That Generate button will just download a zip code in a basic Spring Boot version of code. We'll be using that as a default, and then we will build rest of the classes and integrations to the rest of the classes and integrations with the GraphQL in shortly. Okay, so once you download this, extract the zip folder, and you will see a folder will be created. If you want, you can copy that into your own project folder from the downloads. It's not necessary, but I would recommend this is the best practice. So once you have this on your Spring Boot project or the project folder, I'm going to import that into my Eclipse. For this demo, I'll be using an Eclipse. So people feel free to use IntelliJ or any of other IDE which they are comfortable with. So you need to select the project folder, import that. Once you import that project into the Eclipse, it takes in a couple of seconds, but let's see. I think it looks like it's pretty fast. You can see the default package with the default application on it. That's a default class name has been generated by the Spring Boot initializer code or the app. You can run this. Okay, so this has been make sure that you have the version correctly configured. I think it looks like my Eclipse has a slight problem. Let me rectify that in a second. So you can go to the properties and just make sure that you are using the right version of the compiler. In this case, the version has been selected 15, but looks like my Eclipse doesn't have a drop down for 17. But this project is using a 17, so let's go there and manually edit that. You can see, is there anything over there? If it's not, I can look at, I already have an installed JREs on it, so you can see there is 17 up here. If you already have it on the drop downs, on the first drop down, you can select it from there. If it's not, you have to manually select your Java 17 path, and then you can see that's been updated. It will be still 715, but if you already have 70 over there, select that. So let's restart the application. If you want, it's better to refresh that screen also. Okay, so I'm starting the Spring Boot application. So you can see that's been started with the Java 17, and then application has been started successfully. So let's go to localhost, and we don't have any APIs at this point available, so I would go with the actuator because I do have an actuator enabled it. So you can see the response coming back for the actuator. But this is something cool I would like to introduce for you, right? So let's do JSON formatter Chrome extension. Something you should have it on your browser. If you are working on a REST API or Spring Boot developer, I would recommend. So let me show you what it is. Once you added this Chrome JSON formatter, refresh the page, you will see a very beautiful way of JSON rendering on your browser. So I would recommend that to be configured, this Chrome plugin. Okay, so once you configure this plugin and then you make sure that the application is working successfully, now we have to go do some coding on it. So for that, I'm going to create a package. The package is going to be controller. So basically, I need one controller and two Java objects, and that objects will be populated dynamically. So on this controller, I'm going to create a controller. This is a bookshelf controller. So it's controller called bookshelf. I'll be creating a controller and want to make it that as an right now that's a default class, but just a basic class. But let's put that as a controller. You need to use a controller annotation to make the controller to be a controller. So once you have the controller, we can write a couple of methods up here. But before that, let's go to the package section and create two Java objects. That's basically we call it as a domain object. So we need to create one more package. The package will be for the domains, and we will be creating two different objects. One is the author and the other one is the book, right? So there is two objects has to be created. Let's create a book first, and then we'll create a author. So in the book class, let's create a couple of parameters. These are we need to create a couple of attributes, and then we need to create a getter and setter methods for that book class. So now I'm creating the getter and setter methods for this class with all the attributes, and also in case if you're not familiar with Lombok is another way of you can configure Lombok in your Eclipse, and then you doesn't have to create a get run setter methods. You can add a few annotations. It will help you to have all those get run setter methods. So now I'm going to create a constructor. That constructor, it will help us to create the objects or load the object more faster way of it. So once you create the book class, let's create another that will have a couple of parameters, which are like IDs and then names. Let's put break a couple of more fields. Let's do that first name and last name. And also that this will create the getter and setter methods. So once you have the getter and setter methods, let's create a few methods to load some data to these objects. So just keep this in mind. This is just a static data load. Ideally, this data might be coming from your database. You need to have a controller, or controller will be communicating to the service and DAO layer to bring the data back to your controller. Right. For now, I'll just load it as a static data. We'll just put some sample other data. We'll just put 2 or 3 datas on it. So let's put other 1, other 2, other 3. So there are 3 others. I'm loading it. Okay, let's put these are some of the others on our database or the data. So now let's when the static data load has been completed, then basically you need to write another method to find by ID. Create another method. So what this method will do, this method will be accepting an ID as a parameter. That ID will be looking at on this list to find out whether there is an ID present. If then, just return back another object. So we'll be using a Java stream to do this. So others dot. So we'll get that actual list, and then we'll do a filter on it to find out whether there is an ID exists on the data set or not. If you're not familiar with the streams, you can use with any for loop to find out. You can find out any for loop to find out this actual object, whether it's existing on the list or not. You can put that conditions. For now, I'll just use the Java stream to find it. So this will help me to return the other object if the ID is already present on that list. So to find first element, or else just put it as a null. So that means in case if the ID isn't present, or the ID is not available, it will just give you the null object back on it, right? So that's the static data load on it. So now let's do the similar things on book. So we need to load some static data to the book, and also we'll have another method to fetch that information by IDs. Just basically declaring a static array list that will have bunch of books elements. So if you look at the parameters are like, book constructor will accept the ID and name and the page count and the other ID, right? So we do have like 3 authors already on the other class. So we will use one of those authors for each records. Let's put the Spring, the book name is that. Let's put some page count. So you know that there is an auth 1, auth 2, auth 3. Those are the page book IDs. So we'll use that book IDs up here. So we'll just create like 3 records. So let's put like book 2 and book 3. Those are the IDs for the book. And auth 2, auth 3. Those are the 3 authors we have it. So this is basically just to load some static data as I mentioned earlier. Here and I can just increase the page number to something different. Let's put like 175. Also, this also should have another method to fetch the information. So that's I will make that as a public method. So that's where you can access from outside of this class. So the similar way, that also will just give you the book object if the incoming ID is present on this list. Let's find the first element, or if the element doesn't exist, we'll just return a null. Right, and also we need to return this object, book object back on it. So that means like, if there's an ID comes up, it will just look at the streams or the list and then find out whether the ID exists, or for then it will return the object if it's not null. Now we need to create few methods on the controller. You have like one controller and 2 Java objects. And that object will have a static data load, and also there is a method to find out the ID based on by ID. So now in the SRC main resources, basically you need to have, you'll have an application.properties. Over there, you need to add another parameter or property, which is Spring GraphQL, GraphiQL enable true. So this is what you need to add it up there. So that will help you to enable the GraphiQL on your Spring Boot projects too. Okay, now we are going to create a schema file. So for that, you need to create a plain text file. in a folder called GraphQL. So you create a GraphQL folder, and then in that folder you need to put schema.GraphQL. So here we are going to put the query definition, the schema definition up here. So I have it already added on screen. So I just added this. It's basically like in a book by ID, then ID, and then I have to say book. What is the book class? What are the parameters it has it? And page count, author, and then there is an author class which will have ID, first name, and last name. So this is exactly a replica of that, whatever the objects we created it, and also a book by ID. So now once you have the schema file, so you can go to controller and create book by ID class on it. So that's matching with that, and then we have to make it, this is an annotated, and also we need to have an argument which is string ID. So that means like, by passing an ID element, you will find a book object over there, right? So now let's put it as a book. That's a return type. We do have a book method has a okay, I think we did a mistake up here. I think public get by ID. Okay, we need to put a static to just call it as like that. So we'll do like book dot get by ID. So that's where you can directly call. Otherwise, you need to create an object to do it, which is also still fine. And we need to do a query mapping. So this is the mapping to a particular query. Basically, when this method has been executed, it is basically accepting an ID and then returning back a book object on it. So once you have the defined query mapping methods, and then you need to do in schema mapping. Author.get by ID, and then let's get that book.get author ID. So that means like if any books comes in, like, and then it will be fetching the author information and then sending it back. So this is the two methods we need to write around the controller. So now we have a controller, domain objects, and the schema file, and also enable the GraphQL on application properties, right? So once we have all this information is correct, and then we have to terminate the current application running, and then restart the application, or you can restart the application, right? And once that the application is restarted, let's go to the GraphQL configurations. Let's go to the browser, and then let's go and search for GraphQL, and we can download. We can click on download, and let's see the details. So there's a GitHub project for that. You can follow these links to download if you want, but for this demo I'll be using a Chrome extension. We'll go to the Chrome extension in a second, but if you can explore the GitHub project to see more details about the GraphQL. But for now, let's go to a Chrome extension. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a GraphiQL Chrome extension not this link. Let's go down. Yeah, there one. So GraphiQL Chrome extension web store. You can add this to your browser. Once you added this version on your browser, basically all you have to do is like go to the URL. So you make sure your application is started. If your application is started, then I would recommend you go to GraphQL localhost 80 GraphiQL *path /GraphQL. So this is the browser utility. So basically you can write the queries up here to see. So I'm just going to declare a query, book details, and book by ID. That's method I'm going to call it. And then I'm going to say ID is book 1. Then now I need to specify what are the response parameters I needed. So in this case, it will say that, book ID and name. So it will just in the right side, you will see the response is only like an ID and name. Now as I added the page count, so it will say the page count also. So you can request what are the parameters you needed for the book ID. So this is basically the way GraphQL works, but you can explore that more on it. So in case if I want other information, so I can request that okay, give me my other information. Other is classes inside the book. You need to know what is the schema, the GraphQL. Then you can say, hey, okay, that's a book response, and then also you can say what is the first name, whatever the information you requested, that's the response you get it back. Right, so you can request all the attributes you wanted, and then the response will come back with like that. That's the way GraphQL work. So it normally it's only request what you exactly needed for. The front end or the caller has more control on what to get it back as a response on it. So I push all this code to a GitHub repo. I'll add that all the links on the descriptions. And also thanks for watching this video, and please post any comments or questions you have it. I will try to answer sooner.